This section 4.5 is called the Introduction to Determinants, and we'll get into what a determinant is later on and why they're useful. But the book seems to just want to move in the direction of just showing you how to use determinants. And like I say, we'll explain their use and what they are shortly. So pretty much we're going to look at 2 by 2 determinants and 3 by 3 determinants. And that just has to do with how many rows and how many columns they are. Sometimes they're called squares because they're an equal number, two across and 2 down, or 3 across and 3 down. But the formula on the bottom of page 370 basically looks like this. And A, B, C, D are numbers. And that equals A times D minus B times C. So if there were numbers in there, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, that would equal 1 times 4 minus 3 times 2, and then that would give you a negative 2. And that's pretty much what we've got there. All right, so if we look at example number 2, though, they're using it in a somewhat useful way. They're setting that equal to 8, and then they're taking these two multiplied together minus these two multiplied together equals 8. Bring the 8 over, and we've got a quadratic equation that you can factor into 2 binomials. And x equals 4 and negative 2 there. Okay, so next step, 3 by 3 determinants. And it's so much easier just to take a picture rather than you hear the click, click, click of my iPencil on paper or on the tablet. Okay, so what we've got is we have a bunch of numbers written here, 3 by 3. So that equals this times this times this plus this times this times this plus this times this times this minus, and then it gives you what you're subtracting here. So you notice that the A, B, and C go very well together right there in that angle. But when I get to this one, I'm doing this number times this number times this number. So it's just kind of going wacky then. So it's good to have that formula handy so that you can follow this. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this formula a little bit so it isn't so wonky. So here's the trick in order to solve these easier than trying to remember all of this stuff and, this number times this number times this number, is we take our first two columns and we write them here. So then we can do A1, B2, C3, and that would give us here. And then we add A3, B1, C2. We add the product of that, and then we add the product of A2, B3, C1, so this column. Okay, so we multiply each of these three numbers, and then we add them together. Then we subtract, and then we go the other direction. So let's go the other direction. A3, B2, C1. And then we subtract A1, B3, C2. And then we finally subtract these numbers. So You add the product of the numbers that go from left to right downhill, and you subtract the product of the numbers that go from left to right uphill. So let's look at one, and maybe that'll make it a little bit easier. Let's move that up there so we can kind of use that as a reference. Okay, so example 3 gives you that determinant, that 3 by 3, and they say find the value of that. So what we're going to do is what I did up here on top. I'm going to repeat the first 2 columns. Okay, easy enough. Then I'm going to take these numbers and multiply them. I'm going to write it out. I'm doing it the hard way. Then I'm going to add the next column. Then I'm going to add the next column. Then I'm going to subtract. Get my pen out here with right. Okay, so then I'm going to subtract the product of those. So 4 times 0 times -2, which will automatically just give you a 0. Then I'm going to subtract the next column. Let's do that in yellow. And that is -1 times 1 times 1. And then I'm going to subtract. I'm going to have to make that a little smaller so it fits. The 3, 2, 1 here. 3 times 2 times 1. So you can pretty much do this in your head. 0 times anything is 0, plus 12, plus 4, minus 0, plus 1, minus 6. So there's 12, 16, 17 minus 6 is 11. So it's that easy. Although this here looks like, oh my goodness, that's pretty confusing. If you just follow the trick that the book presented by adding these 2 columns here, and you start with your only column with 3 in it, or your diagonal with 3s, you're going to ignore the ones on the end. So it's just, you start with the bottom one, go up, add those together, subtract, and you get everything that you need to do. So, did I say, okay, we're adding these together, subtracting these, and that's pretty much it when it comes to that particular method. Now, that's the first method. The second method has to do with what they call expansion by minors. I prefer the expansion by minors just because if you get into matrices, which we will a little bit in the next few sections, expansion by minors gets to be very handy then, so it's good to learn it now. All right, so let's look at method 2. This is top of page 373. And one of the things that you need to understand about this is that you don't need to understand it yet. I'm just interested, and the book is just interested in you following the method, following the rules on how to do this. And then when we get further along, it'll be explained to you how to actually use this to solve algebraic problems. So it's just another method of finding the x value, the y value, the z value that folks had come up with over the years, and it can be pretty handy. So anyway, let's look at this. I had mentioned earlier that we're going to do this second method. It's called the expansion by minors. And what we're going to do here is we're going to decide whether or not we want to expand a particular row or a particular column. It doesn't really matter. You pick which row or which column you want to expand, and then we'll be able to find the answer. and we'll do the exact same one we did for example 3 that we found the answer to be 11. We're going to do this by expansion by minors. So what this looks like, for example, is we're going to take the first row. So we are going to expand by minor by looking at just the first row. So we're going to write down the first row numbers. I'm going to put some space there because we're going to put some parentheses here. And, oops, I'm sorry, not parentheses. These little cool symbols. Okay, so there's our numbers on our first row. So this is the part that gets a bit tricky, so let me try to highlight this as we go. So because we're looking at the 1, we're going to look down and over, and the numbers that we're going to care about are the 0, the 1, the -1, and the 1, what is not highlighted. Okay, now we're going to look, let's do red here with our highlighting. Let's look at our 3. We're going to go the row and the column, and we're going to write in this little matrix symbol everything that is not highlighted in black in the same order. Okay, now let's do yellow. We're looking at the, whoops, sorry about that. This should be a -2. Okay, so let's highlight in yellow the -2, its row and its column. So what is left over is a 2, a 0, a 4, and a -1. Okay, so that's what we have at this point. That is our 3 elements in row 1 with their minors. These are called minors. They're 2 by 2s. So we've got our 3 elements, 1, 3, and -2 from our first row, and then we put our minors in there. We could have put 1, 2, and 4, and then our minors would have been different. We would have done it the same way, but they would have been different numbers. It doesn't matter. You're going to get the same answer regardless. Okay, notice the picture that just popped up there with the plus and minus sign. So that is from page 373 when it talks about the sign array. And I will probably teach you another way to do this, but right now let's just follow what the book is saying. This is telling you what the signs are that go between each of these minors here. So this here has a plus sign, so I'm going to put a plus there. The next sign is a minus sign, and the next sign here is a plus sign. So that tells me that I'm going to subtract this minor from this one and then add that one. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're going to write +1, and then if you remember from just a few minutes ago, we took this and multiplied it, and then we subtracted this is the product of that. Okay, and then after that we take our, let's get this back to black, -3, and we do the same thing. This minus this. Okay. Then we do plus our -2 times this minus this. Okay. Now we just start putting all this together. So this is 0 plus 1. So this is going to end up being a 1 here. Over here we have 2 minus 4 is -2 times -3. So that's going to give me a +6 for this section. And for this part here, we've got -2 minus 0 is -2 times -2 is a +4. So that gives me 11, which is the same answer I got when I did it in the first method. Now again, I like this one better. It might seem a little bit more complicated at first, but it's really not too bad. So we'll try a couple more practice ones and get you a little more familiar with it before we stop this lesson. So I'm going to shut this one down and we'll do 4.5b